change is a difficult thing, and as we enter, I suppose, the next chapter of New Zealand's history, anxiety is to be expected in some ways.
I think so. Look, I went for a walk around the lake last night, and in the setting sun, I happened upon a fern frond with several koru. In fact, there was like more than I could count, about 9. A big one at the top, and then lots of little ones behind it. And what I thought as I reflected on this image, I took a photograph of it, and I thought to myself, that's a little bit like chapters in life. But with one key difference. When you're reading a chapter in a book, the passing of another chapter usually gives you a good indication of how close you are to the end.
Exactly. And I mean, it can be quite exciting, turn over a page. I mean, I think that's a lyric from the Lifehouse song we just heard. Turning over a new leaf, to use a more horticultural metaphor, perhaps. There can be some, or a new frond. There can be some excitement in change in new chapters, but not always exciting, right?
Well, I think we often see the trouble is that when you have that frame of mind of the chapters of life, turning a page is like a book. You're getting closer to the end. You're getting closer to the conclusion, to the resolution, to the happy ending. To the bit where all the characters, find their way, fall in love, or they reach
find
success,
out who done it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whatever the resolution is, that tends to be the way that we think about chapters, that each one gets us progressively further and further, or closer and closer towards the end goal. But life is a little bit, it's a lot not like that at all, actually. So in a book, we have the security of knowing, by the time you get to the 14th chapter, all of the characters, and you might have an idea that there's a plot twist coming, but the whole point of a story is that it's crafted to take us to an end conclusion. And I think that's often why we end up rewriting the chapters of our lives. We search the events or the seasons or the chapters in order to find meaning or to make meaning that helps it make sense to us, that helps us to put it into this context of this had to happen so that I could move forward to ABC. And we do it all the time, and often we actually over spiritualize it too. That's a conversation for another day. But I think that the reality of the human experience is that often we might talk about entering into exciting new chapters. That's probably one of the most overused cliches when it comes to marriages and births, right? An exciting new chapter, an exciting new phase. But actually, we're at a point in time, even right now, if we think politically, we're in a point in time where actually there's an awful lot of people. There are some people who are desperate for a turning of the page for a new chapter. And there's an awful lot of people for whom the idea of turning the page or entering into a new chapter is full of fear. It's full of trepidation. It's full of a sense of uneasiness, of that if we turn the page now, things might only get worse. And I think the older we get, the more we get caught out by the chapters in our lives not necessarily going the way that we thought they would.
Or perhaps we read too many dystopian novels, Tash. Which dark places are going to take us next? I mean, this is, I suppose, broader than personalities. This says something about how content we are with the way things are at the moment, because change, improving ourselves in our situation, this is part of the human condition. Good to have some aspirational goals, and certainly staying still leads to stagnation, but we can settle. We can go, you know what, I really like my life at the moment. I don't want to turn the page.
Yes, and comfort has much to offer us. It's not necessarily a demand on the human experience that actually you move forward. Oftentimes we talk about the never-ending growth mindset, of, well, you've got to keep growing, you've got to keep stretching, you've got to actually, can we talk for a moment about sustainable happiness? Can we talk for a moment about contentment? And I think that's a unique challenge that perhaps Kiwis face more than some other cultures. We're perpetually seeking out the next thing to prove that we're just as good as all the other big kids, all the other big players on the world stage. There are some tensions, I think, within that. One is that we can push people we can push people to falsify or to rewrite the chapters of their lives in order to make them look better or sound better on social media, or to jolly everyone along into, hey, this change has happened and the change maybe was hard or terrifying, but don't worry, everything's going to get better, right? That's our default position is, hey, you might be worried about turning the page, but don't you worry, because as soon as we turn this page, everything in the next chapter has got to be better than what's been before. The reality is life sometimes actually sucks a lot, and that's not what happens. Most of us, I think, as we move into adulthood, it's not uncommon for us to adopt a little bit more of a position of, oh my goodness, God, what might happen next? And oftentimes that's quickly followed by, God, where are you? And are you paying attention to what's going on? And so I think, where that happens in our personal lives and where that happens at a societal level, and I think, we see often the rise of some of those fringe political parties every season. And oftentimes those fringe parties are driving all of those fear messages that we have about turning pages, about the change in chapter. And oftentimes it's driven not out of what might be just around the corner, what might be able to happen, but often driven by a lot of fear of, hey, whatever we do, we want to go back to the way it was before. We'd like to go back to chapter 4. We like chapter 4. Chapter 4 was comfortable.
Let's turn pages in a backwards direction. Now, so sticking with the literary metaphor, I suppose most good novels, they have an antagonist and a protagonist. They're the good guys and bad guys. And politically, we can do this as well. My concern is that this may, if anything, deepen some of the divides in our society. Those who are happy to stay in this chapter and those that are looking forward to the next chapter, it just becomes another way of defining the us and them, which seems to be cementing itself within our culture. Would you agree with that? This is another way of, I suppose, characterizing people and causing people to be speaking across each other?
I think that risk is always there, and that happens when we try and devolve ourselves into simplicity. When we try and make things that are actually very complex and kaleidoscopic in color, black and white. So we kind of retreat to our corners and we go, okay, I offer this comfort. Historically, it's rare for New Zealand to have a 3-term government. We like to give people a couple of turns, couple of go-rounds, and then we change over to the other side for a little bit. So rest assured, guys, give it 6 years and things will swing back your way if you're worried about things changing. And likewise, if you are thinking to yourself, oh my goodness, we're going to win, and for the next 6 years, I'm going to have the right of I told you so at the family dinner table. Gosh. Well, maybe be cautious and remember that you've only got 6 years to enjoy that privilege before it all spins around.
Political swings and roundabouts, I suppose,
I think the question is, how do we want to participate? If we were to talk about, it's true that sometimes in the chapters of life, heroes in a book, the hero usually stays the hero the whole way through. And the villains are the villains. Sometimes in life, the heroes become the villains. Sometimes the friends become the people who wound us. Sometimes our political leaders fall from grace or take things in completely the opposite direction of what we hoped they would. And I think if anybody's, listening to today's tax announcements and the weekend's tax announcements, and basically everybody trying to decide what happens with the money that we earn and how much it costs to run this country, there are going to be people up and down, disappointed or, quietly surprised. The reality is that we have a choice about the attitude we take into the chapter. I'd like to encourage us towards cautious courage. That no matter what happens in an election, for example, we can still stay true to our character. No matter what happens with the heroes or the villains or what we think the giant plot twists are, we can stay true to our character. We can stay the protagonist of sorts in our own stories. And so perhaps we need a little compassion as we think about, okay, turning the chapter actually does have an awful lot of unknowns, and perhaps we might need a little compassion for ourselves and others as we get ready to face whatever's coming around the corner. But also that cautious courage that, okay, if I stay true to who I am and continue to push forward in the things that I believe in the ways that I believe are, part of being a good citizen and a good contributor to the overall story, maybe there's an opportunity to see or experience or learn something new in this chapter that's coming.
Yeah, no, hey, exciting stuff, or perhaps anxiety-inducing stuff, but change is coming one way or the other. Tash, some brilliant food for thought today. Thanks so much for joining us.